I think I'm also picking up that people think that if it's architecturally interesting bit of the river, then plastic party boats, not a good idea. And that also if there was any residential issue, we wouldn't want it outside Churchill Gardens, for example, where there's a lot of residential there. But, a bit between Lambeth Bridge and, say, Tate.
There's a gap
Britain, there's a gap
if
there.
it's not grade 1.
I think that you should take account of historic vistas. I mean, if you look at the Canaletto picture, and then you move on to Monet, I mean, these are sort of two artists I can think of who have painted...
Whistler.
Whistler, another. That is something which is detrimental. So I think if you had a grade 1, you should not have too many boats, and you may move the commercial boats into a part of London which is less historic, because I'm sure that also some tourists come to London because of the view which they may know from Whistler or Canaletto or whatever.
So it is our issue of the views, the issues of the listing and the issues of the
And
design
it's simply
as well.
sensitive handling.
Yeah.
Stephen?
I just wondered how proactive the City Council was in inviting, when the chrysanthemum and the President and the Discovery went, why weren't other historic vessels invited in? Isn't there a... I just wondered, that's a point. I think it's something that we should be thinking about, or ought to be thinking about.
The SSS Queen Mary, in fact, is a paddle steamer from the outer islands, and she came to London when the Queen Mary had her engines taken out, and therefore she lost the right at where did you register all your boats to retain the name on the water. So the name originally was on this paddle steamer. So when the Queen Mary was a hotel off America, they reverted the name to the paddle steamer. And then I think it's owned by a Chinese, and I think it's run as a restaurant.
Right.
So she has a link, slightly historic, but...
Absolutely, it's on the Register of Historic Vessels, and I think my point was particularly about, and it links in with what the gentleman said here,
Design.
the stretch between Waterloo Bridge and Blackfriars Bridge. That seems to me the critical heart of London river views. The stretch, you've got backing of Grade 1 listed buildings there. It's to my mind, an iconic central London site. But there are sites just off that are less contentious. You've got sites nearer the Houses of Parliament where there's a lot of river bus services, scheduled, tourist services, and they seem not to be an issue at all. It was this particular stretch of central London where the policy. But going back to what the lady said, absolutely, the Queen Mary is on the Register of Historic Vessels. That was all researched before the inquiry and looked into. But thank you.
She's. How many aldermen do we have, Anne? There's
Me.
you and Sir Simon, isn't it?
Me and Simon.
Yes.
Actually, when I was appointed, John Bull was
Yes.
still alive.
Yes.
But no sooner was my robe made than he died. So the one spare robe was waiting, and Simon's filled it.
Here we are. I think.
Could you link this to the policy on views? That you
I
did
think
last week?
so, yeah.
There's
I
a
think-
protected view, like you see in the postcard views.
Absolutely, in the
Then-
listing, I think,
then
as well
maybe
as
that
in the
could be tied up to the Thames.
Yeah.
Can I
Shall
raise...
we-
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, can we move on to canals now?
Well, there is one point about the river that worries me. The councils, Wandsworth, Lambeth, Westminster, are very strict about allowing billboards on the river so that it doesn't become a site of billboards. And this is not just in the area we've been talking about. And for example, St George's Wharf kept putting them up without getting planning permission, had to go through the long process of getting them taken down because planning wasn't agreed. Needless to say, they got about 3 years advertising out of it before that happened. That was very bad. But what's happening now, because the river seems pretty clean of that, the boats have started to have advertising on them. Now, there's some boat, the sort of boat that they call it a clipper, I think, that used to go from Tate Britain to Tate Modern, has got Nat West, which is a rotten part of the rotten Royal Bank of Scotland, passing under the bridges all the time, advertising Nat West. And the Port of London Authority tell me there's nothing they can do about it because buses are allowed to have advertising on them. And I've never really heard such rubbish in my life, but I would have thought the legislation could be arranged to stop people advertising on the boats, because if this happens with one, they're all going to do it in the end, and it'll look a terrible mess.
It's a quirk of the advertising regulations that the regulations do not apply where the advertisement is displayed on a vehicle that is normally moving. That, I think that is more or less the exact word. And it was brought in to deal with buses, basically the London bus. But I take the point. You'd have to. I don't think it says vessel though. It does say vehicle.
Well,
so
the
there may be
Port of London Authority are adamant they can do nothing about it.
Yeah.
And I think somebody needs to do something about it.
Could you do it under licensing?
Yeah. I'd just like to, if I may just add one quick supplementary point to that. The Port of London Authority was quite heavily in favour, I think it's fair to say, at the inquiry of the party boat operation, not necessarily that particular operation, but it was very clear that the Port of London, who was, I think they were served with notices, I can't remember, I have to check that for the record, but my impression was the PLA was supportive of the leisure evening party boat economy.
No problem with that, it's the advertisements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you
Choose
could,
those, yeah.
and anything else on the river?
Can the council do anything about stopping advertisements?
Well,
No,
the
not
remarks
that
are going to
we-
be
no.
it's taken back, but
Yeah.
with
We've certainly
fake notes.
registered your concerns and see what we can do legally.